You good?
I want to know what this video's going to look like. Folks at home, new merch. There'll be a video with details about that when we have them, but so on brand. During the last half century or so, Godzilla has squared off with innumerable giant-ass monsters hell-bent on destroying the world as we know it. Of this pantheon of kaiju kikassery, one of the most famous and well-known is Rodan the Fire Monster, a beast who is canonically a communist. Communist dinosaurs. Nah, man. Dinosaurs, man. Like, what did you do against, like, communist dinosaurs?
I'm just, no. When I was a kid, I saw this, like, tape in Japan that was, like, one of those, like, Godzilla collection films, and they were showing the Mothra one, and you see Mothra going across, and they were like, Mothra in the background. Now I'm picturing Rodan doing the same thing, but it's that Soviet propaganda music.
Can we edit in? This is one of those things that I showed you and you didn't believe it, of that picture of Jeremy Corbyn. Do you remember that one? So, folks from America who maybe don't know, Jeremy Corbyn, the leader of the Labour opposition, for a while in the United Kingdom, like, the media fucking hated him. And the coverage of him was so cartoonishly biased, and no image better sums this up than the one that I showed you that you did not believe, where it's like a picture of Jeremy Corbyn they edited, and put it in like red and black, put it in front of like the red square, and then give him like one of those like weird Russian hats to make him look like a communist. It's one of those things that's so cartoonishly over the top you couldn't write it. Because if you did, people say, well, there's no way people will be that fucking blatant about this sort of thing, and it's just communist. So can we now just like put Rodan and there wearing the little hat next to Jeremy Corbyn? Anyway, the Godzilla series is not exactly one known for its subtlety. Smash cut to that scene from King of the Monsters where just King Ghidorah is roaring and he's got the fucking Jesus cross in front of him. And like, you lost your shit at that bit because it's like, it's so ridiculous.
It looked like an album cover. It sent me.
Like, the symbolism is so over of like, these creatures are beyond your god. And there are still people who watch those movies like, I don't see there's a message here. And I recently rewatched the first Godzilla movie for a podcast that I'm on, GoGoPodzilla, there'll be a link to it below. With Whiskey Studios, a sponsor video for an artist called PD, and Rami Ishmael from the internets. And we were watching the first Godzilla, and let's have a bit in it where they're talking about the oxygen destroyer. And like, they have a line that fucking sent us all, where it's just like, the oxygen destroyer could be used to help humanity. And it's just that screenshot of a scientist like, we could find like peaceful uses for the oxygen destroyer.
しかし僕は必ずこのオキシジェンデストロイヤーを社会のために役立つようにしてみせます。
I think it was Rami who just said, guys, do you think this movie has a message it's trying to tell us? And I'm guessing I don't need to tell you, a person with eyes and the ability to think about something critically, that Godzilla is a big old allegory for nuclear war.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but for the folks at home who may be like, well, what do you mean by that? Godzilla, the character, is an allegory for a nuclear bomb. With a producer for the original series describing Godzilla as a walking nuclear weapon, in the sense that you can't run away from Godzilla, you can't stop him. You can only hope to maybe get out of the way. And there's a great quote from someone involved with the original movie, where they're asked, so what do you think like Godzilla is? Like, are they representative of weapons? It's like, no, they're destruction. Godzilla is destruction personified. And like, even like the American-made movies are still rife with that symbolism. Like we mentioned, like the fucking King of the Monsters one. I'm like, yeah, Ghidorah! Like, fuck religion. It's all about this giant space dragon. Let's go. And all you need to do now is just, editor, put a little Pope hat on each one of Ghidorah's heads. New religion right there. That's the theme present in like those original Godzilla movies. Like Mothra is like, you know, the spirit people pray to. And I always wondered in that universe how stuff like Christianity even exists anymore. When you can have the Pope on stage and be like, yeah, like, you know, I'm God's representative on earth. He told you, like, you know, do this and do that. Like, well, where is God? Because there's a tribe over in Japan who worship a god called Mothra, and Mothra turns up once a year to kick the shit out of Godzilla, who people also worship. Why is God not coming down here and joining in?
Carl, are you ready for the comment section on this fucking video?
I don't give a fuck. And that's one thing that's worth mentioning about like those later Godzilla when they started being like basic action fair. The messages were still there. Like, even with things like Mothra, where you have just like, it's this wiggly fucking worm model. There's still a message there of like respect fucking nature or a giant moth will cause a hurricane.
I mean, I stand strong female role models.
Yeah, like one of my favourite images on the internet is like just putting one out there for all the strong female representation in media, and it's like the T-Rex from Jurassic Park, Mothra, and the Alien Queen. It's like that one of like celebrating strong black father figures, and it's like Uncle Phil and Piccolo. It's like, yeah! So let's try and rein things back in and talk about Rodan the Fire Demon and how he is, canonically, a big old communist.
So Carl, explain to me how a giant dinosaur pterodactyl thing can be a communist.
Well, much in the same way Godzilla is an allegory for nuclear weapons, Rodan was conceived as being symbolic of the nascent nuclear threat posed by the Soviet Union. Which is why he's red. There's like other elements to it that I'm not going to get into next. They're very, very boring and like nerdy, but just I love the idea that like just Rodan, fucking communist, bring it on. And Rodan cleans Godzilla's clock in some of those movies. Like there's one where Rodan just drops Godzilla onto a pylon, but the pylon hits Godzilla right in the penis. So I can show right now by the gif that I got made.
Oh no!
That's Japan. Oh, it's right in his dick!
No!
And there's just something about, as well, the idea of dropping something from orbit that's so mean. Like it happens in King of Monsters, doesn't it? Like Ghidorah drops Godzilla from orbit. And he's so mean. Because he falls for so long, and it really hurts.
It's one of those things of like, yeah, every time there's like a superhero or something that can fly, it like inherently feels a little bit stronger than the thing that's like confined to the ground.
Yeah, and in those like early Godzilla movies, like people in costumes, they just have shots of Godzilla stood there as Rodan's just slapping him and flying away. It's like, what does he do? It's like when he's fighting Ghidorah and he's just slapping. It's like there's nothing I can do. And like Ghidorah, I'd argue, is scarier in those early movies than he is in like the King of Monsters movie. In the King of Monsters movie, like, you know, Ghidorah's kind of scary. In, like, those early movies, like, he is constantly firing those lasers all the time. Like, he is never not firing lasers at all. Like, it's so scary, because, like, Godzilla, you know, he'll use his atomic breath a little bit. He'll kick through a building. He'll walk away. Ghidorah is just, like, the mobile oppression palace. You can't stop him. Just every conceivable direction is having lasers fired at it. What do you do?
Well, the thing is, Carl, if you could fire lasers, would you ever stop?
No, I would do. I'd just fire lasers all day. Reining things in once again, it's worth noting that almost every single kaiju in Godzilla canon is inspired by something similar. As I mentioned, like Mothra isn't like inspired like vaguely by like, you know, the threat posed to nature, and nature become like having its revenge via a giant god moth, which you know is how all revenge should be carried out. But a notable exception to this rule is King Ghidorah.
So what's up with King Ghidorah then?
Well, King Ghidorah was an oft-touted theory that, much in the same way Rodan was symbolic of the threat posed by the Soviet Union. Ghidorah similarly represents the threat posed by China. In particular, the nuclear threat posed by China around the time the films were made. And the director of the film has gone on record as saying, no, just straight up no, that there is no symbolism behind Ghidorah. What are you, stupid? And that to me is so fucking funny, because everything in that series has this really obvious, like, symbolic double meaning to it. But Ghidorah is a seeming exception to this rule, and whenever that theory was brought up to the director of that movie, I was like, no, you're wrong. Like, well, what is Ghidorah supposed to be? It's like, a dragon. It's like, but surely, like, you know, the dragon represents China. You know, like, dragons have often been associated with China in literature and mythology. It's like, no, it's supposed to be a reference to an old Japanese folktale of the Orochi, which is a dragon in Japanese mythology. And when the director would bring that up, people who were clued up on Japanese mythology would say, well, the Orochi has 8 heads and 8 tails. Ghidorah only has 3. What's that supposed to mean? To which the director responded, well, we thought about giving Ghidorah 8 heads, but it seemed, and I quote, excessive. I can only imagine how fucking terrifying Ghidorah would be if it had 8 heads. 8 all firing lasers in a given direction.
I'm kind of just imagining one of those sprinkler heads that kids play with in their yard going like this, but with lasers.
And it's just all 8 heads going off at once. And like
flapping in the wind.
And Ghidorah's getting so fucking hype. And Godzilla's there like just like with sunglasses on me like, yeah. That's what I like. So nearby Lulu, while I have you here, there's something I'd like you to clarify for the audience at home.
Yes.
And that is the pronunciation of Ghidorah. Because I have said that word in other videos in the past, and I always get weeaboos correcting my pronunciation. And I'd like to clarify right now, is that the correct pronunciation?
In English, yes. The way it's spelled, like with the G and the H together, like Ghidorah is perfectly, like that's what they were going for.
Yes. And what language do you speak?
Japanese.
Yes. So for those weak, and I remember like you saw those comments, like, well, you are pronouncing it correctly. I told you how to say that word.
It's one of those things of like, okay, so yeah, if you want to say, like in Japanese, it's spelled like Ghidorah, Ghidorah. Like there's no lingering. But to make the softer G, I guess in English, that's how they wrote it, Ghidorah. Mm-hmm. So Ghidorah.
It's like when you see people say Gojira. It's like, yes, that we know that's what the name is in Japanese, but like Godzilla is an acceptable alternate name for the character.
But that's not even true either, because it's not Gojira, it's Gojira. Like the da is not ra, and the G is not G. Gojira and Gojira, two different things. Yeah. So Godzilla is perfectly fine.
I'm not sure where you fall on this, but I find people who do that pronunciation, that's way more cringy. Than someone who, like, I say that's more cringy than just a bad pronunciation of the actual thing. And I just wanted to get that clarified because whenever I say King Ghidorah, I always get someone correct, like, that's not how you pronounce that word. It's like I got someone who speaks the language to, like, check my pronunciation on this one. Because Godzilla stands, man. They're so boring. The thing is, I love Godzilla, but I don't like talking about it with people who like Godzilla because they get so up their own fucking ass about it. Can we, though, just talk briefly, though, about Godzilla versus King Kong and how much ass that gorilla whoops? Because that gorilla is a fucking legend.
What is it with you and gorillas?
They are the most noble of creatures. And just something about like the way they made King Kong in that movie. There's so much pathos to that gorilla. Like when he's just like lying on the boat and he's like, I fucking hate this. I fucking hate being a gorilla. I remember we watched that film together and we both lost our shit when like he dislocates his shoulder and pops it back in against a building like an action hero. Just like when Godzilla as well does like Nightwolf's X-ray from Mortal Kombat 11 with the axe and he's like, whoa, in the air with a fucking axe. Just doing like the old Harambe Revenger on Mechagodzilla.
Oh my god.
There's no, I will never stop saying the Harambe Revenger. So that's what I call like Donkey Kong's forward air. Just the Harambe Revenger to the depths with you. Why do they have to give the gorilla character in Smash Bros 4 dunks? He's got 4 dunks. Enough for everybody. You just don't, you're just like...
You're like, oh, let's talk about Godzilla as the end, or you just want to talk about gorillas again.